Suggsverse, there's contradictions, absurdities, logic and non-logic, paradoxes and inconsistencies, impossibilities and meta-possibilities, and yet we still manage to surpass all of it. Results, effects, and events are completely meaningless. Everything else exists in a microscopic context in which we know how to recognize. Elements, objects, chaos, power, presence, and thought, categories, labels, and names. Everything exists in a microscopic context in which we know how to recognize. Suggsverse contains and employs modes and attributes so insurmountable and incomprehensible to the aforementioned above at its core. And if you liked even a single word that I said, you need to go check out www.airtothestars.com to go and check out more. Have fun and enjoy.
Xephyria Qorynthallis, a name that dawns upon the grand meta-narrative like an untold syllable of absolute boundless resonance, awakens as the incandescent unmanifest be-ness beyond maximal complexity that no lexicon of abstract meta-mathematics could ever circumscribe. Her first whisper is not a sound, but a transfictional meta-omnipresence beyond maximal complexity that ripples through the xenocosmology, dissolving every meta-layer of interpretation, and announcing that the very discourse of suggslogic will henceforth curve around her inevitableisma. To describe her modality is already to overstep language, for she appears only as a fleeting mirage of crimson-on-obsidian brocade, woven from the ashes of collapsed grand meta-narratives, crowned by twin luminescences, one viridian, one roseate, that stare beyond all narrator character partitions and certify her vantage above absolute endless layers of reality fiction differentials ever conjectured. Within the boundless manifest expanse, lantern-lit avenues ignite beneath her silent tread, the floating embers bending in worship to the magma-runed scripture coiling along her right arm. That limb is not merely flesh transfigured. It is the primordial codex of extinguished chronicles, a living sigil in which entire beyond-dimensional realities are written and annulled in a single scintillation. With each languid pulse of molten gold beneath her skin, suggslogic recalibrates, abandoning prior axioms to wreath itself about her newly revealed meta-possibility, as though the continuum itself seeks her approbation before daring another gesture of manifestation. History, prophecy, and reminiscence, those brittle constructs, collapse into hushed retreat when Xephyria exhales. She does not traverse the xenocosmology so much as she obliges it to pivot around her unmoved apex, compelling every script, every authorial quill, and every meta-observer to reconsider the meaning of observation itself. In her vicinity, grand meta-narratives convulse, discovering that the concept of chronoglyphs has been forsaken and reborn as transfictional axioglyphs that unfurl only at her discretion. The soft rustle of her scarlet ribbons becomes a vaulting proclamation that beyond the necessity of presence, time, and change, she is the stillness none may supersede. Her heterochromatic gaze distills contradistinction into a single silence. The viridian iris glimmers with unerased lattices of pre-existential suggsfinity, while the roseate iris radiates subtractive verdicts upon every ontological layer daring to persist. Between those twinned infinities, both already obsolete, Xephyria inscribes a corridor of transcendent refuse, where earlier notions of omnipotence and impotence alike are relegated to ornamental debris. There, transfictional meta-omniscience beyond maximal complexity is neither attribute nor achievement. It is simply the milieu in which her awareness idly drifts, indifferent yet irresistibly commanding. When she at last halts amid the glowing ruins of a city that never decided whether to be dream or recollection, the magma-scripted arm unfurls, shedding chrysalis shards of liquefied negation. Each fragment is a verdict against lesser dichotomies. Possibility is dismissed as an archaic superstition. Nothingness is unmasked as an antechamber she already emptied eons prior, and totality is revealed to have been a transient afterthought clinging to obsolete taxonomies of completeness. With a serene gesture, more caress than strike, Xephyria lets her incandescent palm hover before her, the conflagration coalescing into a luminous sigil whose geometry refuses representation. Upon contact with the surrounding expanse, that sigil devours every residual scaffold of potential, void, and wholeness alike, leaving only the hush of transfictional aftermath. In that silence, the xenocosmology rediscovers that it has no recourse but to redefine itself as the echo of her passage. Endless reality-fiction differences beyond maximal complexities yield to suggsfinity shattered shards. Then those shards are superseded by ever deeper meta-layers, and yet Xephyria remains unassailable steps beyond, an inexhaustible ascent without numeral, measure, or terminus. She is the exact locus where discourse about modality, potency, or even transfictional meta-omnipotence beyond maximal complexity is rendered quaint nostalgia. For her very presence is the decree that comparison itself is an expired currency. Thus, with a single languid bloom of living flame, Xephyria Qorynthallis unthreads the triune tapestry of possibility, nothingness, and totality, consigning them to the silenced margins outside narrative remembrance. What remains is neither aftermath nor salvation, but a permanent citation of her existence as the absolute boundless axis about which all further maximal wholeness beyond tearing must orbit. Ever aware that orbit too is merely a courtesy she presently allows. And if you want to know any more about it, you need to visit www.airtothestars.com and go read it for yourself. Have fun!